All right. Well, with me today is Dasha Maximov, founder of WealthCo, community dedicated to enhancing and optimizing women's health. And I like the term you have on there, Chief Explorer. I love that piece. So Dasha, welcome to the Rest and Recovery podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, we're talking offline, but, we're touching on the key points of, hoping to have a conversation with you is, what is your backstory that brought you to the point to create Wealth, which I like the little acronym or word you created with that is for women's health. And so, looking to kind of get your understanding of how you got started down that path.
Yeah. So, I'll try and make it short because I've done other podcasts where I explain a little bit more in detail, but basically went from M&A to deciding that I wanted to be interested in or doing a master's in neuroscience. I was really interested in the brain because I had had concussions in my childhood and was always interested in memory, specifically long-term memory, because I didn't really remember anything from a kid. And then while I was doing my master's in neuroscience, I fell again. I slapped my head, and this time it took me out completely for 14 months. Amnesia, depression, fatigue, just not being the person that I was.
Wow.
And I think that I had always identified, especially given that I had been in consulting, been in a world of go, and I had identified with my mind. I had always identified with, I can do everything that I set my mind to. And then here, all of a sudden, I don't know who I am. And I don't know how to get out of it. I don't know when it's going to be over. I don't know if these headaches are going to continue for the rest of my life. I mean, just had the kind of my feet pulled out from underneath me. And so from there, that's how I got into biohacking, because when I went to all the different doctors, they would do the tests and the tests would show nothing really. And, everything was fine. And when you wake up in the morning and you still don't remember what you read the day before, I would say everything's not fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it was like serious amnesia or like not remembering conversations and portions of your life.
Yep. So it was because I still tried to do the program because I was really interested in it. And so I would read the journals, right? They would give us scientific journals to beat up and understand and discuss the next day. And so I would spend 3-4 hours reading these journals. And then the next day I would look at my notes and I would barely remember what I read for 3 to 4 hours, literally the day before.
Wow.
And again, if you're somebody who is, I was a nerd when I was a kid, so the idea that I've studied for 3 to 4 hours and I have no idea what I learned the day before, that's bonkers to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You make a great point around your identity, your one's identity associated with your understanding of things around you. And especially if your term, a nerd, your superpower is your brain, then, like you said, who are you at that point? And how do you kind of reclaim that? So what was that
And I
path
think
like?
I was going to say that to me was, right now I think everybody's into kind of really understanding themselves, really understanding.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are doing psychedelics to have an ego death. A lot of people are, going down that path, which is an incredible path, and we can talk about that.
I don't even know what you just said, so maybe another time. But
but I think the question of when, and I feel like a lot of people within this health space, you've had some sort of a shift, a massive shift,
sure,
some sort of a pain story, be it that wakes you up, that's kind of says, wait, hold up. If God forbid something were to happen, in my case, right? All of a sudden I didn't know who I was or where, potentially my future had been stolen away from me, because anything, my anticipation was that my future was going to be with using my brain. Now, if I can't use my brain, what does my future look like?
right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So biohacking was an absolute savior to some extent, because when I was going to all these different doctors, they would shrug their shoulders and say, okay, well, it's not this. And so I went to a whole host of different specialists, from looking at my eyes to looking at my balance to looking at my jaw at some point, saying that that I had TMJ, and TMJ was the reason for my chronic headaches. I mean, you talk about checking all the boxes. I absolutely did.
Yeah.
Um, which is great because there's incredible specialists out there. But again, it's a lot of times, I think, especially within brain injuries, we're still figuring out the brain. We're
Right.
still figuring out. I mean, we only now know about neuroplasticity, and we're only now starting to say that you can continue learning throughout your life, which is a beautiful advancement. I mean, that's tremendous. But we
Yeah.
didn't know that 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Cause I remember always hearing like, you at a certain age, you no longer create brain cells. And so you're locked in, and that's, the best you're going to have. And that's your bucket of brain cells. And it just,
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense, right? And
yeah,
it's amazing because that does give us, I mean, at least for somebody who's had an injury like mine, it gives you hope. It
yeah,
gives you hope to say, oh wait, there are a whole bunch of different biohacks, a whole bunch of different things that I can do that to get myself back. Maybe I'll never be at 100%, maybe, but I'm not going to stop myself and be at 40% for the rest of my life, you
right,
know?
right,
I think that's kind of where I've come to, where it's, and people ask me, they're like, all right, well, where are you now? Am I at 100%? No. I still have days that I'm just flat out exhausted. I'm still electrohypersensitive. If I'm around devices for a long period of time, I feel wiped. Um, I still have a number of these post-concussive symptoms, but I've learned to manage them, and I've gotten to the point where I can be functioning again.
right,
So yeah, biohacking has been tremendous in getting me back when kind of conventional medicine was just saying, it's not this and it's not this, and we don't know.
right.
Um, so yeah.
Kind of a dead end. Well, I mean, you kind of touch on two things. One, hope. It sounds like biohacking kind of gave you that window of hope, although not a strategy. I think my opinion is hope is a critical ingredient to success.
Hmm.
But also the pros and cons on quote unquote traditional medicine, not traditional, but modern medicines, the, um, the limitations that can occur based on the siloing.
Oh, big time. Prior to leaving consulting, I took a sabbatical and went to India for 6 months, and apprenticed at an Ayurvedic hospital. Because really, at one point, I wanted to become an Ayurvedic doctor. And one of the things that we said when we were taking patients in was, where are you? How much do you believe in this? Right. And where is that level of hope? And I remember we had two patients, one of whom we decided not to take on and not to bring to the hospital, because frankly, she didn't have any hope.
Hmm.
And we realized, and she ended up coming actually to the center kind of 6, 8 months later, when she had already exhausted all of the other options within Western medicine.
Okay.
So it was almost to the point where she needed to get to believe that Ayurveda could help her in order for it to actually work. And I know that you've talked before on your podcast about kind of a placebo nocebo effect, and how strong the placebo effect really is. But it's if we believe that something is that we can change, if we believe that something will work, that in and of itself is such a superpower, and
Yeah.
that hope is such a superpower.
Yeah. It's amazing. I think I've had other conversations where the belief construct of the individual and where they are in their mental strength is such an important part of the healing process.
Yeah.
That if you're not either believing something's going to work or that there's hope, right? That you need to be able to believe in it along with the medicine. Um, it's pretty fascinating.
It was in my case, so big time.
That's awesome. Well, it's encouraging to hear. And you mentioned sabbatical, so I keep hearing that more and more, and I think that's kind of where we are with biohacking or health optimization. It sounds like we're kind of coming out of that .com era mindset
Mm.
that, Mountain Dew and potato chips till 2 a.m. and, the badge of honor of who worked and the latest. And you could point that to many, M&A, your previous environment, within the banking industry, our common friend of Boomer Anderson, who came from that area, to lawyers who I remember a good friend, like that was expected. You come out of law school and you're 2 to 3 a.m. easy, back to the office at 6. So anyway,
It's a fantastic lifestyle, and don't get me wrong. I mean,
sure. Pros and
it
cons to
was
everything, right?
exactly, and I think that's the thing with health. It's the trade-offs. What are you willing to trade off? And I think that so it's okay, are you going to have a lot of money and no sleep, let's say, because banking and consulting is fantastic for a lot of money and no sleep? Or are you going to trade it off and say, no, I prioritize something else, whatever that something else may be. And so
Right.
it's I think to me that whenever I think about health, and I mean life in general, it's what are you willing to trade off? Kind of there I can't remember the book, but basically it's you're gonna have to eat a bad sandwich, a shit sandwich, kind of in anything that you do. The
Yep.
question is, what are you going to choose as that badness, right? So for certain people, sleeping only 5 hours is really not that big of a deal to get to their end goal. For other people, that's horrendous. So it's just, I think it's also, and I wish that more people did this earlier in their careers or earlier in their life of evaluating what is it that they're willing to put up with in
Yeah.
order to get to that next end goal. And I think one of the things, because during my sabbatical, I mean, it was insane. I had so many partners coming to me saying, "What are you doing? You're throwing your career away. You're this is suicide, career
Right.
suicide." What ended up happening was I took the sabbatical, came back, and got promoted that year because I could separate the nonsense from the true thing that we needed to do.
Right.
Because I could, I mean, after seeing, people with serious health issues, I could triage what actually mattered versus not at all. And
Right.
what did we actually need to stress about with the team, and what was the deadline that actually needed to happen versus just something that we were just placating to the to the client, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the sabbatical and the idea of taking time away and really switching off completely and recharging and then coming back and being full force and being able to really kill it. I mean, I was a case in point.
Yeah. I mean, you need that both. I mean, it's kind of the premise of the podcast itself is that, whether it's fitness or work, your job, take it from a fitness perspective, the rest and recovery piece is equal measure as the hit workout or the yoga session. You give that correlation that it all has to be ingrained in there somewhere. You just have to know when and how much is needed. And then that personalization, what can your body take? What you can physically do, like you said, the 5 hour sleeping, maybe you operate great at 5 hours. I'm probably going to look like a vegetable, you know, after a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, with that, um, evolution and personal discovery, you know, how did that get you to the point of realizing you needed to create wealth.co?
Mm. Yeah. So basically biohacking, the evolution was got into biohacking, found that there were other things that I could be doing outside the mainstream, started following a number of different folks, doctors, influencers, etc., and trying things out, and then started seeing improvements. Um, and then we ended up creating Health Optimization, which is a conference that was one of the largest conferences in London, in Europe, specifically for understanding personalized healthcare, if you will,
Okay.
or this idea of biohacking, this N of one, and testing things out on yourself. And when we had the conference, it was absolutely incredible. We had I mean, 2 days, 1,200 people, 40 speakers. It was two of the best days ever, right? Because you're also seeing how many people are just like us, really wanting to start to take control of their health. The challenge was that we didn't really have a voice for women's health. And what I find is that within a lot of these health fields, specifically biohacking, but we're talking on the generality. We're talking, oh, fasting is good for everybody, or oh, this
Right.
diet is amazing for everybody, or this is how you need to do HIIT training. And the truth of the matter is that we're very, very different between men and women. And there's a doctor, Dr. Stacy Sims, who often says women are not small men, which I think is a really I mean, it's a short phrase, but it really is true.
Right.
And we've historically, if you has not done well for women, for a whole host of different reasons. One being that up until the 1970s, women of childbearing age were not allowed to be included in research because they thought that that would actually harm the child. So it was done for good measure, but that means that basically any research prior to 1970s was done on all men. So if we're thinking about things like even the pill, or things that are impacting breast cancer, that
Wow.
wasn't always done on women.
Really?
Yeah, which
Wow.
is bizarre. I mean, we're talking
Very.
breast cancer, which, impacts women a lot more than men,
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
and we're not testing things on women. So
wow.
research has been uh, stifled, I guess, for decades. We're coming back, and we're coming around to it, but it's also that women are difficult to research because of menstrual cycles, because of life cycles. It's
There's
and
more
so
variables, I guess, to kind of determine.
yeah, and it makes sense. So it's not a matter of bashing and saying, oh, well, it's not on that. It does make sense, but that still doesn't stop us from saying that there is a problem and we need to do something about it. And so WealthCo, Wealth is to combat that. And basically, what we wanted to do was create a platform for women to connect and really be able to discuss these things and say, hey, this is working for me. This is not working for me, right? So opening up the dialogue where a lot of the things that are within women's health right now, there really isn't a dialogue. Women, I mean, simple thing, menstrual cycle. It's still considered icky and weird and awkward, and I don't want to talk about it. And do you have one? Do you not have one? Ugh. There's so many
If
things
women
that.
are uncomfortable talking about it, imagine how much men feel about
Oh,
it.
I feel bad for you guys. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, growing up, I never, oh gosh, even to mention the fact that you know, I mean, you would hide it. You would hide the fact that this 1 week out of the month, you're not feeling well. I mean, I remember I have a brother and a father, right? And it was, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go lie down. What? So think about that in and of itself, the fact that we're hiding this, or that we are so uncomfortable even to speak about it and to say, listen, my hormones are completely out of whack, leave me alone. you know like that. So I think part of it, sorry for the noise, I think part of it is women are not small men. We are different between men and women.
Yeah.
We know that there are differences, and just now are we getting to the point that, one, we're getting comfortable to even explain those differences, and then start to do experiments to test out these things.
Right.
Because I think, going full circle back to what I started saying about the research, unfortunately, it still takes a lot of time. And because of the way research is, it still behooves researchers to want to do and to be incentivized to do studies that involve both sexes. And so,
Right.
it's difficult for to come to a researcher and say, hey, listen, yeah, we should do research on women. You should, right? And they have limited funding. They're not really sure whether the XYZ is going to work on men and women, let alone just women, let
Right.
alone women of what, childbearing age or perimenopause or menopause. I mean, that, it's
Yeah.
so I think from a research standpoint, my view on this is that the only way that we're really going to change anything is to truly start doing N of one experiments and then extrapolating that larger to the community and saying, okay, this was your N of one, this was your N of one, this was your N of one. All right, let's aggregate that together as women, kind of in citizen science form.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of crowdsourcing
Mhm.
approach.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's WealthCo. It is a forum. It's a community. It's not on Facebook because no thanks. And and it's an area where we can start these N of one experiments and testing to say this is, and normalizing even conversations about things that historically have been difficult to even say because there's a lot of stigma even associated with, I mean, the menstrual cycle is one thing, but fertility or infertility, sexual
Yeah.
health, even things like postpartum depression or just questions or concerns or insecurities. I mean, all of those things happen, and yet it's all done behind a, you feel like you're doing it on your own when it's really not.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else has similar feelings.
Well, and I think, kind of all related to your point of the privacy piece or keeping things shunned. I think that's kind of a key element at a macro scale of just the conversation piece of just getting it out there and not being able to have that dialogue to,
Yeah,
really uncover and see, oh, you're going through the same thing. Oh, really?
exactly.
And drawing that connection. That's awesome that you're providing that platform to enable that. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
huge.
And to double down on that, I mean, think about, I think previously, historically, it's been, I am my symptoms, right?
Right.
So, oh, I'm really irritated, I'm really agitated, or I have a short fuse or whatever. That is Dasha. And that's completely erroneous. That is my hormones, which I
Yeah.
can do things to change or control or even sit with and just say, yeah, today's going to be a tough day. But I think changing that dialogue, even with our male counterparts as well, right? Being able to say, hey, listen, I'm feeling this way. Oh, this correlates to this part of the month. Oh, interesting. That probably means that I have too much estrogen or too little progesterone or too much testosterone. And I think no, separating out the symptoms from going back to kind of who you are, right? And by
Right.
separating those two out, I think it could make the conversation a little easier to have, even with our male counterparts, who don't want to talk about, you know, the ickiness, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a key nuance or tactic is the language we use. And I wrote down conditions that,
Mm,
as you were talking, that it's the conditions you're working within. It's not who you are. It's the what that's happening.
yep,
I don't know
yep.
if that's kind of in line with what you're saying.
That makes perfect. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because I mean, the more that I get into this and more that I read up on all the different cascade of things that go on in our bodies that we don't even think about.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm tracking my glucose levels, and have been playing around with it and loving it.
Yeah. How's
Y-
that going?
Oh my gosh, you've got to do it.
I,
Everybody, I'm convinced that every single person needs to do this for at least 2 weeks
yeah.
just to be shocked.
Well, I literally started this morning. So I
I
just
saw that. Yeah.
leveled up and literally levels.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it'll be interesting. So I want to hear more about your results.
Oh yeah. So white rice, pooh,
No,
insanity.
no
It
bueno.
just spikes me up completely. Yeah. I've noticed cold showers do something similar, as do tough conversations. So
Interesting.
it's interesting because you think about your glucose levels as just related to food,
Right.
but in truth, it's food, it's exercise, it's
Emotions.
again, like, yeah, cold. I mean, actually, interestingly enough, that jumping into the cold ocean this morning didn't do anything, but having a cold shower did.
Huh.
So who
Wonder why that
knows?
is.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the fact that when you're, I mean, I'm completely in the water at one point in time, like just jump right in, right? You dive in versus with the cold shower, it hits you different. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, beautiful sunrise versus, tiled
But
room,
that's it. Yeah, there's also the light component to it, which that's another element that I think is now coming up. And I mean, I follow Jack Cruz, Dr. Jack Cruz. He's fantastic, and he talks a lot about light, as does Alexander Wunsch, um, and how light really dictates a lot of these different cascades. One, your sleep cycle, obviously. Two, your hormones. I mean, talk about, if we're thinking about the hormones, right? And if we're thinking
Mhm.
about the hierarchy of it, and you've got oxytocin followed by cortisol, followed by insulin, followed by all the sex hormones. Well, if that's the case, then morning sunrise, what is that doing for your cortisol levels? Right?
Right.
It's helping raise that. So then the cascade down of insulin and sex hormones are also impacted. So if
Wow.
we're thinking about women's health, or men's health as well, but women's health in this case, of many women have a hormonal imbalance. Well, okay, we can go one chain up and we can talk about insulin and therefore glucose, but then we can go a chain up to that and talk about cortisol and talk about oxytocin,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to me that when we talk about women's health and hormonal imbalance, oftentimes, one, it's what are the supplements we can take and all that,
Yeah.
which, I mean, great. But
They can be
but my
helpful,
que-
sure.
yeah, but my question is, if if we didn't have to supplement, what are the natural things we can do to naturally boost and rebalance ourselves to the extent possible?
Right. Yeah, it's funny you say Dr. Jack Cruss.
Cruise, yeah,
Cruz.
Kruse.
I just saw a video of him the other day, and it was a young woman in his like cohort or group or what have you,
Yeah.
talking about exactly that. And he was basically saying, uh, you know, yes, the Top Gun sunglasses may be cool, but they're actually not helpful at all. And
Yeah.
it's almost like, well, wait a minute. They've been saying UV light is not good for your eyes, so that's why you have to have these sunglasses. And he's saying that's a 180. That's like actually completely and utterly wrong,
Yep. Yep.
and maybe
So that one
causing
of my
harm because of it.
yep. So one of my first hacks was removing sunglasses, because so the first hour of the sun doesn't have any UVB in it. So you can't actually burn your retina. You can't do any, like, you can't harm your retina because there's nothing in the sun to harm it. Right. So the
Interesting.
first hour of sunrise and the last hour of sunset. Now, outside of that, obviously, don't be an idiot, and stare at the sun. But
Yeah.
there is, I mean, if you go back to India, but kind of over time, there is a huge component of even yoga where it was sun staring. And you start yourself every single morning a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and then you grow. So for me, when I first did it, my eyes were watering like crazy because you're not used to it. And
Sure.
so it's like, all right, 5 minutes, the next day 6, the next day 7, and you slowly build up and you build that kind of solar callus is what he talks about.
Yeah.
But it sets off. So for me, if I'm, when I watch that sunrise in the morning, one, that means that I have to be awake. That's good. But then, it's that it kicks off the cascade of hormones, which is absolutely natural and where we should be living. We talk about a Paleolithic lifestyle in terms of diet, but then what about a Paleolithic lifestyle in terms of everything else,
Yeah,
right?
that's a fair point.
Waking up with the sun, going to bed with the sun, not staying up until 2 in the morning with blue light flashing at you and messing up your cortisol, messing up your hormones. I mean, once you get into this, it sounds, I know that I'm kind of throwing a lot, but it's it's quite simple actually when you start really understanding how your body works with the natural rhythms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Dr. Jack also mentioned too with the blue light, it's designed to replicate or the sunlight, and so that's why it jacks up your circadian rhythm and why you can't sleep, because it's telling your body awake, 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 awake. And so it's doing, your body's doing what it's supposed to do, but
Yeah.
it's a false alarm or false positive
Yep.
with the blue light kind of shocking your system. And
Yep.
you wonder why you're exhausted and your circadian rhythm's all jacked.
That's it. So you're think about it. You had dinner probably, I don't know, 7:30, which is already after the sun has set.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then okay, you're winding down, you're watching Netflix, chilling out, whatever, fine. Well, you're getting a from that screen, the blue light coming from it has the same frequency as the sun at solar noon. So what that means is your body, your eyes are sending your body a signal of, wait, wake up, wake up, wake up. You shouldn't be going to bed. Why? Because it's solar noon, right? So it's now 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. You're watching Netflix thinking that you're calming down. And in truth, boom, 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 wake up, wake up, wake up.
It's midday.
So it's midday. And what's crazy is that people talk a lot about sleep right now, and they're talking about melatonin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you need melatonin to sleep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We all know that. Now, what ruins melatonin? Light. So your body is getting this signal of wake up, and don't produce melatonin. Why? Why would I produce melatonin at midday? It doesn't make any sense, right? You shouldn't be
Right.
sleeping at midday. So what ends up happening is you've been awake all day long, right? And you've had your coffee. I mean, like we're just not living in sync at all with what we should be doing, and we're surprised why we're sick, right? And then you go at the very end of the day, you're unwinding, but in reality, you're jacking yourself up to wake up. And then you're so exhausted because your body has been awake for 16, 18 hours or whatever it is, right? That you hit the pillow and you pass out like that. If you look at your Aura ring, your latency is a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, because
Right.
you're so exhausted. But the problem is that melatonin, again, because it doesn't release if there's light. So you hit the pillow, but your kind of melatonin release is pushed out for another hour, 2 hours. So in truth, melatonin, which is an incredible, and it's also an antioxidant that's going through your body. It's kind of like a janitor, and it sweeps everything
Right.
and it cleans everything up. It doesn't have enough time to clean everything up,
Yeah.
right?
So
Eh,
now all the corners of the room have dirt
Yep,
still, and then you compound that day in, day out, a
yep,
lifetime later, and
yep.
then
And
you know,
then think about then the other hormone that people don't talk about is prolactin, which prolactin is the hormone that basically tells you you're not hungry, don't worry about it, don't eat. Prolactin, in addition to it's also the hormone that comes out when women are lactating, but it is the hormone that comes out at night because you don't want to be eating at night, right? It suppresses your appetite so you don't wake up in the middle of the night. What happens is if you don't have melatonin kind of released as you go to sleep, prolactin also gets pushed out, and so you're actually, instead of having that kind of during the nighttime, it's pushed to almost the rest of the day. And it impacts then leptin and ghrelin, which are the hormones that talk about satiety, or whether you're hungry or not hungry.
okay.
And so if you haven't slept, your melatonin's messed, your prolactin's messed, you're not getting the right signals for your leptin and ghrelin hormones in the next day, which is why you want to be eating more the next day when you haven't
Wow.
slept.
Wow.
Like the body is this incredible cascade of
It's so cool.
hormones
Of
and signals.
interdependency. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's just fascinating because it just shows, the term integrative medicine is getting, talked about a lot more rather than the silos. And it's kind of like you need both, right? You need that silo down so you can better understand, but you need to have that ability to zoom the lens back out
Mhm,
and get that aerial view to see the interdependencies or interconnectedness. And it just
mhm.
seems like that's a big gap that we're just getting into.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think, what's crazy is that we've known a lot about this stuff, but we haven't necessarily had all of the metrics to measure it,
mhm.
really.
Yeah.
And I think that because we haven't known exactly how important light is, we've confused ourselves. Because if you think about all of the different research, all the different tests that have been done, where has most of research been done? In a lab. What's in a lab? A whole bunch of blue light.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking
Oh,
about that,
I didn't
even,
think about that at all. Because yeah, you're doing testing in a non-real environment. It's completely manufactured, static environment that's not real.
Yep.
I never thought about the blue light and how that affects the things that are being created. Wow.
Hmm. And so then, I mean, to circle back to women's health, think about, so this I haven't, it's anecdotal, so caveat it with that. But women nowadays are sitting in front of a computer all the time because they're at work, which is fantastic. I couldn't imagine a life where I was just a stay-at-home mom. I love learning. I love producing. I love creating. I love working. So caveat with that as well. But we're sitting in front of a computer all the time. Now, men historically have had their necks covered with a
The tie.
collared shirt and a
Yeah.
tie. Women haven't. What isn't typically what is an issue for women? A large issue for women. Thyroid. Where is your thyroid?
In your neck.
In your neck. So all that blue light, where is it coming? Besides it coming to your eyes, which is signaling a whole bunch of things within your entire body, it's also coming right at your neck, right? You're also getting it shining and impacting your hormones,
Huh.
impacting the thyroid, which is impacting your metabolism, impacting your hormones. So my question, and again, anecdotal, but a lot of these things that are happening with women nowadays, with hormonal imbalance, with infertility, with exhaustion, with autoimmunity. I mean, autoimmune diseases, we as women have about 80% of the autoimmune diseases, the cases for autoimmunity
Really?
in America compared, like in total, 80%. So, and when I say autoimmunity, I mean MS, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, all of that. It's predominantly women
Wow.
because, again, women are not small men, because our hormones dictate so many things. And so if cortisol is impacted, again, it's that cascade:
Right.
oxytocin, cortisol, insulin, sex hormones, right? So cortisol, which is impacted by blue light, if cortisol is messed up, and on top of that, besides the blue light side of things, we're all stressed out of our minds, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And what is that doing to our sex hormones? What is that doing to
Suppressing it.
overall health, right? And what is that? And then when we start talking about our hormonal imbalance, then the full circle comes through when we start saying, oh, you have your hormones are not balanced. Okay. What's the next level? Well, we've got PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, we've got endometriosis, we've got infertility, right? All of those hormones are obviously imbalanced, and then we have these diseases. So it's a crazy cascade, and it is the modern life that we live. So it's the question of, okay, how do we still live the
Coexist.
modern life
Yeah.
and and not be in a cave somewhere.
Right. Right. And and I think, yeah, that was my question is like, how do you coexist with that? Because like you said, we're able to do this podcast. There's pros and cons to everything. I guess like anything else, it's in moderation.
Hmm.
But what's that proper moderation, which turns into personalization? Understand
I'm
how you are affected by the environment.
Yeah. I mean, my view is, how do I infuse natural things into every element of my life, right? And almost reimagining and looking at this lifestyle that we live right now as
Hmm.
if I was an alien coming into space and seeing, like, wait, what are they doing? They're sitting inside, covered all the time. They barely get outside. I mean, like the normal person is outside. I don't know what, maybe on the weekends,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe during their morning walk with their dog, when they're completely covered up as well, like no skin is seeing the light of day. So I think the question is, okay, reviewing almost my entire day and saying, okay, where can I infuse it? So for example, in the morning, if I can get out and see the sunrise, I'm doing it, right? I'm now on the West Coast, so it's a little bit more difficult. On the East Coast is always easier. But yeah, see the sunrise every single morning. Okay, if I do that, I'm obviously not going to be going to bed at 12 or at 1, right?
Right.
It's going to naturally shift my day.
Yeah.
Um, then, okay, how do I get grounding involved as much as possible? So, all right, I'm going right now, we're on this podcast. Absolutely. I'm surrounded by EMFs. How do I combat that? All right, right after this, you better believe that I'm going to go outside, take my shoes off. And if I need to have a call, then I can have a call while I'm barefoot on the grass.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's infusing it a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. It's saying, okay, well, once a week, I'm going to do a full day of of fasting, right? A whole day, I'm not going to eat. Or every single day, I'm going to try and eat within a shortened period of time, like our ancestors would have way back when.
Right.
It's putting on blue block. I mean, like there's so many different little, it's little things, but I think the key is starting to question whether this modern life is is part of the problem. And once my brain is, if I understand it, then I'll do something about it, right? So if I understand how light, water, magnetism is impacting me, if I understand how modern life is impacting me negatively, then I will do something about it.
Right.
If I don't understand it, then I'm just going to just chalk it up to, oh, I'll figure it out when I actually get sick.
Yeah.
Um,
Or just not do anything at all. Yeah. I think that's where, the personalization, understanding yourself, self-awareness is an important thing. And, you mentioned the diets earlier. Yeah, they're all good, but is it best optimal for you? And it may not be, whether it's
right.
keto or paleo or fill in the blank.
Yeah. And to me, it's, I don't know, I'm just fascinated by the body. That is the geek in me. That is the nerd in me, right? Because it's so cool to see when you can change something and it you feel better, right? Or you have more control. So for me, I think everybody to some extent is a control freak.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the thing of realizing that you can control so much of this.
Empower your
And
type A, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We just got justified.
Yeah, lean into the neuroticism that is rampant through our society right now.
I know. And, personal anecdote real quick on the technology too. I have found myself with doing the bands, like I'm doing BioStrap. Did Whoop, just did the levels. I'm
Yeah,
finding myself a little too checking. I'm like, all right, I got to manage this and turn this sucker off too. It's like it's feeding into the very thing we're just saying needs to get managed better. So it's
big
like this
time.
tension of great technology that can help amplify, but now can help amplify too.
Big time. I was telling somebody before that biohacking and this personalized medicine and personalized kind of optimization, all these things that we're talking about, is fantastic because we've gotten so far away from understanding our own bodies, right? That we
Right.
almost need these gadgets to relearn. Now the question is, at what point does that become too much? And saying, okay, I've learned what I need to learn. Now I need to actually get the intuition, right? And that to me is the next evolution. So it's from complete lack of knowledge of where we are at kind of how you are with food, with environment, with sleep, all that. Like we've lost that intuition. So use the technology up to a certain point where you've kind of got a handle on it, and then say, okay, great. Now I'm going to let my intuition fall into place. So for me, for example, I love the Aura Ring. It's fantastic. I never wear it, right? Except when I am doing a proper test for something,
Right.
right? So when I want to test out a specific supplement or a specific, new change in my regime or something like that, you better believe it, I'm doing it, right? But in general, I've hacked my sleep to such an extent that I know that if I don't wear blue blockers, I'm going to have poor sleep. Right? Like I
Right.
don't need the, oh, you've got an 85 and therefore you have a crown on, in order to say, yeah, I'm
Yes.
going to have a good day,
Yeah.
and then I love that. And we talked about it with Dr. Casey about levels where, it, many of these companies, it's how do we make sure that we are doing good, but we're also not getting people addicted to it,
Yep.
because that's another form of addiction. And talk about, then we can talk about dopamine and how, I mean, right now with the CGM, with the continuous glucose monitor, I am checking it 25 times a day.
Right.
It's straight up obsession. It's not okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there is a finite purpose for it, of saying, okay, I want to know what a cold shower is going to do. I want to know what this conversation with this specific person, which, oh wait, past couple of times I've spoken to this person, I've seen a little bit of an uptick. Interesting. But I think it to me, it really is biohacking, and personalized health is not good if we don't end up relearning intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we could probably go down a bunch of other routes with that. But so we're kind of coming up on time. What would be for the women and the men out there who are supporting their women, whether it be their sister or spouse or what have you? What would be, some encouraging things to say to those listening right now to kind of take that one first step forward?
Know your cycle. Understand your cycle. There's a lot of different apps out there. There's Clue is the one I use. Natural Cycles is great. In the Flow is another one, or in Flow. Those are the kind of the top three. But knowing your cycle is going to give you a lot of information. No, I mean, I should be able to ask you what day of the cycle are you on, and you should be able to answer it, right? Because knowing that is going to tell you how your hormones are, where you're kind of what you should be doing from a food standpoint, whether you should be fasting, whether you shouldn't, what you should be doing from a workout standpoint, and also just how you're feeling, right? So if you're feeling down, that could very well be because you're at a certain point in your cycle when you don't have progesterone, and that's that feeling of anxiety and rah. But if you don't know your cycle, you have no clue. You won't understand whether that's actually you or that's just your hormones.
And
And I think, yeah,
observationally, it sounds like it could feed into frustration if you're not aware of that.
absolutely. Absolutely. And also by knowing your cycle, you'll be able to then say, oh, is my cycle off?
Hmm.
And if my cycle is off, then maybe the next step in this, going back to that chief explorer idea, exploring your health and saying, all right, well, maybe the next exploration I need to do is to do a hormonal test and see, oh, wow, actually, I have fairly high testosterone. Or, wow, I make a lot of estrogen, but I don't excrete it in the right way, right? There's three different pathways that it can be excreted.
Okay.
And one of them is really not a good sign going, it could be cancerous,
Oh, wow. Okay.
or carcinogenic rather. But it's, so knowing that, so saying, okay, I know my cycle. I know it's not normal perhaps, or it is normal. And therefore this is why I feel this way. And if it's not normal, then saying, okay, I want to do a hormonal test. There's loads out there. The one that is great is Dutch, Dutch, and Dr. Carrie Jones is absolutely tremendous. For any woman out there, I would highly, highly, highly recommend following her on Instagram because she gives a lot of information. And then
Awesome.
I think that in terms of that hormones, then the next level starts becoming, okay, well, if I do have a hormonal imbalance, then you go down the what supplements can I take, or where am I getting my hormones from? Is it from my skincare? Is it from, there's a whole bunch of things in the environment, plastics, that really could be impacting that.
Yeah, you mentioned skincare. We could probably go on for hours, like that impact on hormones and your health for all people. I mean, the chemicals involved.
Huge, huge. The one thing I'll say on that, because that's a long, long conversation, is Environmental Working Group, EWG,
Yes, EWG.
is
Yep.
wonderful. And they have an app. You can put in all of the different skincare that you think that you have in your house, and then you can see very quickly what is good and what is not so good.
Yeah, yeah. Key thing to note: know what you're consuming, uh, in anything you do.
Yep. And consuming is not just digesting or internally. It's it's the environment, it's your mattress, it's your air quality, it's your light, it's your relationships, it's
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah. So many influencers. It's amazing. Well, Dasha, I feel like I could probably talk another 45 minutes on a variety of these things. And I have another question that I know would turn into a 45-minute discussion. So I'll hold that maybe for a round 2 for you.
Sounds good.
I appreciate your time. I do want to close it out with 3 questions for you.
Okay.
So what are you reading right now?
1 second.
Okay. Lights Out.
It's called Lights Out. It's by T.S. Wiley. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. And I have a whole host of different notes that I've taken. He does a beautiful...
the sticky notes on that.
The sticky notes, yeah. I told you, I'm a nerd. It's the sticky notes of... And he combines light, sleep, sugar, and how they all interact. It's fascinating. The book was written in 2000. It's almost like he had a silver ball or whatever, crystal ball, to know where we were going with all these blue lights around. But It's insane. Yeah, fantastic book. I'm also actually rereading so I usually have 2 books, one for kind of science and health, and then one for personal, I guess.
Okay.
And I've started rereading my old journals.
Oh, interesting.
Very, I would say, yeah, just kind of interesting to see your own evolution or lack thereof, and just kind of playing back, because I think one of I basically was rereading the ones that I had right around the concussion, and what was I grateful for then, what was I struggling with then, what was I, and how much of that have I even changed, or I'm still working through.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know how often we go back and re-reflect on that. And it's been interesting.
Yeah. Cool self-discovery or rediscovery.
Rediscovery.
What are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
I really like Sam Harris's podcast, and shameless plug, the WealthCo podcast.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah. We have basically all the podcasts that I've seen. I didn't get enough information about women's health. They're talking about fasting, but again, it's not fasting specific for menopause, perimenopause, childbearing. So anytime that I'll have a guest on, I'm trying to kind of focus them very much into women's health.
Okay.
Even if the answer is we don't know and we're not sure, because even that answer is still a good one, because that means we have to do some research. So, yeah, WealthCo.
Awesome. What is your go-to rest and recovery method?
Swimming outdoors first thing in the morning. Reason being because that sets off a cascade of everything, and that absolutely guarantees that I will get good sleep. And so for me, it hits on so many different levels. It hits on grounding. It hits on doing something first thing in the morning and then feeling like the rest of the day is just an extra gimme, because I've already won the morning. It's fat burning. It's energy. I mean, it's everything. So
it's just good.
Not that it's a silver bullet, but for me, it is that rest and recovery. I feel just like $1 million after that.
Awesome. Well, Dasha, again, thank you so much. Appreciate what you're doing in the health space and with wealth, and look forward to seeing where it goes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me and having me on. This is fun.
Yeah.